My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 31, and I'm standing in the walnut-floored living room of the ancestral estate in Newport where the annual Thompson Family Summit is being held. In my mind, I've always called it the Parade of Pretense. Every year, they gather here, shimmering in perfectly tailored Versace gowns, Patek Philippe watches, and perfumes so expensive it feels more like a luxury showcase than a family gathering. I'm different. My charcoal Everlane blazer doesn't shimmer, and the pearl earrings I'm wearing were a birthday gift from my mom when I was 17. Still, the thing that makes people look at me like a crack in the Thompson crystal is that I walked in here alone, no arm candy, no designer label to mask my embarrassingly ordinary self. My cousin Lydia, 18, whispered behind me as I crossed the room. "Oh my God, is she seriously still driving that old car?" Then laughed. I thought stuff like that was for the grounds crew. I didn't turn around. I learned long ago that in this house, any reaction is treated like a sign of weakness. My family, the Thompsons, have been considered real estate royalty in the Northeast since the 1932, when my great-grandfather, William Thompson, turned a forgotten stretch of coastline into a luxury resort destination. Since then, anyone bearing the Thompson name has graced finance magazines, real estate industry summits, and charity auctions where bidding starts in the five figures. But among that sea of opulence, there were two people who chose a different path: my parents. My father, Daniel Carter, was the youngest son of my grandfather, branded a bloodline traitor for refusing to join Thompson Realty. He became an architect, designing modest suburban homes instead of luxury hotels. My mother, Marianne, was a kindergarten teacher from Cranston. No wealthy relatives, no dowry, just a warm smile and a gentle soul. Their marriage was once called the worst embarrassment to the Thompson name. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house with grass that always needed mowing and a kitchen that always smelled like baked goods. I didn't fly business class to St. Moritz for winter break, but I had evenings curled up beside my parents, reading books under soft yellow light. And then, when I had just turned 16, tragedy struck. They were killed in a crash on the interstate, returning from a weekend trip to Vermont. Police said they died instantly. I lost my whole world. No one in the Thompson family cried at the funeral. They showed up in black, stood in a single line of pews, and left the moment the service ended. I remember Aunt Penelope whispering to my uncle during the burial, "So sad, but thank goodness, Charlotte's taking the girl." Grandma Charlotte Thompson was the only one in that family who didn't turn her back on me. She took me into this very estate I'm standing in now. Every night, I'd hear her flipping through old photo albums in the library, her hands slow, her breath heavy. One day I asked why she never decked out the estate like the rest of the family. She smiled. "Because, Evelyn, real money doesn't need to be seen. It should be felt in safety, in opportunity, in freedom." During the 3 years I lived with her, I didn't learn how to flaunt wealth. I learned how to build it. She taught me how to read land value charts, how to spot hidden potential in forgotten houses in changing neighborhoods, and how to remain eerily patient when markets panicked. But no one else knew any of that. All they saw was a quiet orphan girl, no headlines, no scandals, no powerful backing. And for the past 10 years, that image stuck. The poor kid living off pity, out of place in a family where every handshake came with stock options, and every dinner was a strategy meeting. I never blamed them for seeing me as a shadow. I was just waiting for the moment they'd be forced to look again. And today, I didn't come here just to attend a meeting. I came to end the chapter they've been miswriting about me for a decade. I still remember that spring afternoon when I was 16. Grandma Charlotte took me to the reading room at the end of the West Wing hallway. No lavish patterns, no expensive oil paintings, just oak bookshelves and her plum-colored velvet armchair. That day, instead of comforting me with soft words or grandmotherly hugs, she placed a brown leather notebook on the table. Without a word, she pointed to the embossed title, "Personal Investment Notes, Evelyn C." I was stunned. "Open it," she said, voice steady and low. "This is how we'll talk from now on." Inside were land price tracking sheets, bond yield charts, and regional asset analysis samples. I'd never seen anyone teach love through a ledger, but she did. Every afternoon after school, I returned to that room. We marked zones on the rise, tracked seasonal housing shifts. She didn't offer quick rich tricks. She showed me how to listen to a city's economic pulse, as if it were telling the stories of the people living in it. One day I asked, "Why doesn't anyone in the family know you're good at this?" She gave a quiet, confident smile. "Because they're too busy chasing recognition. I'm busy making impact." Most people think wealth is what you can photograph and post in a magazine. But to Grandma Charlotte, wealth was the stillness of security in a chaotic world. While my relatives flaunted million-dollar watches, I was learning to find homes that were old but just under 500 steps from a subway station. While Lydia boasted about studying fashion in Paris, I was learning to appraise property based on transit development. She taught me the difference between price and value. A Manhattan penthouse might list for $12 million, but if no one truly wants to live there, it's just concrete in the sky. Meanwhile, a modest home near a good elementary school could be the launchpad for a young family's future. I once asked why she didn't go for fast wins like my uncles. "Because what comes fast rarely lasts," she answered. "You don't need to be the richest person at the party. Just be the one who still has assets when the party's over." The summer I turned 18, she brought me along to scout a home on the outskirts of New Haven. It was a tiny, wood-sided house with a graying roof and a patchy backyard. I saw nothing of value. But she pointed at the map. "See that bus stop? In 2 years, a light rail line will connect this area to downtown. Home prices here will jump 60%. She was right. 3 years later, that house sold for double. After I started college, she kept mailing me local real estate bulletins, long research papers no one my age cared to read. At the bottom of each letter, she always wrote the same line: "True wealth is security for yourself, for others, for tomorrow." Christmas of my junior year, I came home after finals. She greeted me with a quick hug and led me straight to the library. On the table was a thick document bundle tied with a red ribbon. "Here's your Christmas gift," she said. Inside were legal documents, a modest inheritance about $120,000 from a private account she'd kept hidden for years. Not for spending, but as seed capital. Use it wisely. Don't buy things that impress. Invest in what others can't replicate. I didn't use that money to rent a luxury apartment or trade in for a new car. I bought an old duplex in Providence, just 2 blocks from my university. Lived in one half, rented out the other. That's where I began to build. No one in the family knew. To the Thompsons, I was still Evelyn, the orphaned niece, living off Charlotte's kindness, always a little too pale and too quiet at family events. But I still kept the brown leather notebook she gave me on day 1. The pages had yellowed, the corners frayed. The first line she ever wrote in it remained untouched. "Contempt is the best investment asset, if you know how to use it." I used it. And I never forgot. I bought my first property under the name of a limited liability company, Ironwood Holdings LLC. The name meant nothing, but it was the perfect shell to hide my personal identity from any nosy Thompson eyes. The one who helped me through the entire process was Mr. Benjamin Ross, an elderly attorney and close friend of Charlotte's. After she passed, he stayed in touch with me, quietly becoming both my legal advisor and the gatekeeper of every investment I made. On the phone, he always opened with the same teasing line: "Miss Evelyn, is it time to add another patch to your little nest?" We left no trail. Each LLC had a different name, used virtual office addresses in privacy-friendly states. Under names like Red Harbor Ventures, Blackstone Edge, or Marigold Property Trust, I gradually collected house by house, small building by small building in neighborhoods most investors ignored for not being upscale enough. I didn't buy sparkle, I bought potential. From Providence, I moved on to Portsmouth, then Saugus, then all the way down to Stamford. One-story homes once abandoned, run-down duplexes, tiny apartment blocks tucked behind local convenience stores. I renovated each one, but never turned them into boutique hotels. Every upgrade was intentional, just enough to raise living quality without disrupting stable rental prices. I learned that tenants were far more loyal if they felt respected. From heating systems to digital locks, I never cut corners on what brought safety and comfort. On the flip side, I always declined renovation proposals to double rent, like other landlords. That's how my portfolio grew, not through flashy ambition, but through the quiet discipline of a calculated strategy. By the It's time I was 27, I had 9 residential properties and 1 small commercial building, a 3-story walk-up in Pawtucket, leased to dental clinics, a nail salon, and a young attorney's office. 3 years later, the count rose to 12 residential and 3 commercial, with a total appraised value of roughly $72.8 million, not including monthly rental income. The most interesting part? Not a single relative knew. They still thought I was living off some miscellaneous financial consulting job in a nondescript office, driving an old silver Subaru, renting a 2-bedroom unit in a Class B building in Cambridge. They didn't know that building belonged to me. More precisely, to Bayline Property Group, a company I controlled through 2 layers of legal intermediaries. On the 3rd floor, in the corner unit with lake view windows, lived my cousin Caroline. On the 6th, my uncle Jeffrey, the same man who once called me a sunk family investment. A year ago, I got insider information. The building's previous owner was planning to sell, but wanted a quiet deal to avoid disrupting long-term tenants. I jumped on it. Within 8 weeks, the deal closed. I paid $25.5 million, entirely from accumulated and reinvested capital, no bank loans. I didn't change the property manager right away. I wanted to observe reactions. At first, just minor improvements. Full fire alarm system replacement, hallway security cameras, fixing the elevator that groaned every time it closed. Caroline complained in the residents' group chat, "Looks like the new owner wants to turn this place into a hotel, no one even knows who they are." A week later, I read Uncle Jeffrey's comment in an email to the tenant board. "Does anyone know who the new owner is? We should unite and negotiate if they plan to raise the rent." I smiled. Every one of them was living under a roof I provided, enjoying services I directly managed, and not one of them had a clue. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like when a jigsaw puzzle finally forms the full picture, not loud, no applause, just a quiet satisfaction of having seen more clearly than anyone else. On Saturday morning, early sunlight filtered through the stained glass window onto the deep crimson carpet of the mansion's main meeting room. The same room that once hosted Charlotte's tranquil afternoon teas was now filled with the clatter of laptop keys and the shuffle of paper. I stepped in, the soft gray blazer hugging my frame as it brushed the velvet chair backs. Heads turned, some nodded politely, some merely glanced, then returned to the profit charts glowing on the giant screen. My uncle Nathaniel Thompson sat at the center, lifting a demitasse of espresso while tapping his pen on a folder. Hair slicked back, crisp white shirt with no visible creases, the posture of a Fortune magazine cover CEO. "Let's begin," he said briskly. "As you all know, the estate land is currently appraised at around $42 million. After working with the development team from Orion West Group, I believe converting this asset into a luxury apartment complex is a necessary strategic move." A 3D rendering flashed on screen. Sleek glass towers rising where the mansion now stood, along with tennis courts, an infinity pool, and a rooftop cafe overlooking Newport Bay. A chill crept down my spine. This mansion wasn't just property. It was where Charlotte taught me to read cash flow like sheet music, where I mowed the lawn in summer in exchange for finance lessons in the reading room. It was a living legacy, not something you measure in square footage. "I object," I said, voice steady and clear. Heads lifted. Nathaniel raised one eyebrow, as if someone had just faxed into a digital boardroom. "You want to keep a 3-story concrete block in prime coastal real estate?" he asked, as if that were a criminal offense. Before I could answer, my cousin Marissa, who works in PR for a wine conglomerate, let out a dismissive laugh. "Evelyn, don't you rent a place in Cambridge? How would you understand the potential of high-end development?" "I'm not against development," I said slowly. I'm against trampling on emotional value for a few extra lines on a quarterly profit report. Silence. Only one person spoke up to support me. Harper, my cousin, who's currently a resident doctor at Boston General. She stepped forward, gently setting down her teacup. We can't preach tradition every year and then destroy the last piece of her legacy like it's a financial inconvenience. Nathaniel crossed his arms, gaze sharp as a razor. You're entitled to your opinion, Harper. But we operate under the voting charter established after Charlotte's funeral. Whoever holds more declared assets holds more voting power. Not feelings. I clenched my hands under the table. The power structure in the Thompson family was an archaic model wrapped in corporate disguise. Each member declares assets linked to the family fund, and from that, their vote carries proportional weight. Declared assets, not actual ones. Of course, I only declared the inheritance from my grandmother. Just enough to be invited to the meetings, but not enough to hold any sway. They assumed I lived off pity because I never flaunted a car, never talked about my investment portfolio, never appeared in Forbes or Business Insider. Harper held 5%. I had 2%. The rest? Dominated by Nathaniel and two other branches of the family, I glanced at the voting rights distribution chart. The plan to sell the estate was practically approved. Just a little more a final push and it would be irreversible. Nathaniel signaled to his assistant. Please distribute the preliminary voting materials. The goal is to formalize the negotiation pathway with Orion West Group. We need confirmation of support percentage before moving to official contract drafting. I stared at the bold letters on the paper. Phase 1. Demolition and transfer of land use rights. Projected for September. The pen in my hand didn't move. They were about to turn this place into lifeless glass blocks. I couldn't stop them, not yet. But I had a card. I just hadn't flipped it over. Not yet. I signed in the opposition box. Harper did the same. Nathaniel smiled with satisfaction. We have 92% agreement, he announced. I'll be contacting the attorneys soon to begin the legal process. I stood, gathering the papers. You should do that. As for me, I need to make a call. No one knew that last night. I'd asked Mr. Ross to prepare the paperwork to transfer my entire investment portfolio into a new trust, the Charlotte Heritage Trust. One of the trust's core assets? A 30% anonymous stake in the Thompson Family Investment Fund gradually acquired over the past 4 years from members who quietly wanted to sell but didn't want the scandal. As I walked out of the meeting room, their eyes followed me, some filled with disdain, some with confusion. They still believed I was poor, Evelyn the one who scraped for every penny. They were about to witness the most expensive mistake of their lives. That evening, the grand hall shimmered under dozens of crystal chandeliers. Glasses clinked, the scent of red wine mingled with expensive candle wax, blanketing the air in an artificial opulence. Dinner was held in the large dining room, a 16-seat table draped in pure white linens, polished silverware, and embossed menus printed on heavy cardstock. I sat near the end of the table, between Harper and my cousin Kristen, who spent most of the meal photographing her appetizer for Instagram. At the head of the table, Nathaniel raised his glass to toast the recently approved plan to transition the family estate into a new development phase. Glasses clinked all around, laughter spreading like a domino effect. Only Harper and I didn't raise our glasses. As the main course was being served, Nathaniel suddenly turned to his assistant and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. Before we wrap up dinner, I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce a supplemental proposal regarding internal allocation. A few glances shot in my direction, barely masking curiosity. I believe, he continued, it's time we establish a special support fund for family members. Some relatives, for various reasons, haven't achieved financial stability appropriate for the Thompson name. Harper looked up and stared straight down the table. Was anyone consulted beforehand, or are we just being dissected like an admin issue? Nathaniel didn't bother answering her. This fund would be drawn from a percentage of profits from upcoming deals. Each month, the supported member would receive a fixed stipend to enhance quality of life, improve transportation, or meet any essential needs. Like a handout. A rescue package wrapped in family crest paper. To put it bluntly, Marissa chimed in, if Evelyn agrees to the stipend, she won't need to drive that rusty old Subaru anymore. Maybe she could even move out of that rental place into something with a decent elevator. Laughter echoed from the cousins down the table. She might even, my cousin Jared nodded, buy some outfits that don't make people think she works at a public library. The whole table burst out laughing except Harper. I set my fork down, not out of anger, but because what was happening had gone far beyond mere insult. They weren't just demeaning me, they were doing it while laughing, as if I were the after-dessert entertainment. Seems the dinner conversation has come to a close, I said, tone steady. If you don't mind, I'll excuse myself. Nathaniel feigned surprise. Evelyn, there's no need for an emotional reaction. This is family care. I stood up. Thankfully, I've never needed that kind of care to live. No one spoke as I left the table. Their eyes followed, but no one stopped me. Maybe they thought I was hurt. Maybe they thought I'd come back, sit down, and gratefully accept the privilege of a noble family. I turned down the hall, heading swiftly for the library, the only quiet place left in the mansion. The warm glow of the desk lamp fell across the oak writing table where Charlotte once sat, as calm and steady as a reminder. I opened my phone and dialed Mr. Ross. He picked up after 2 rings. I'm here, Miss Evelyn. Is everything prepared? All transfer documents into the trust are finalized. What's the voting percentage after consolidation? I took a deep breath. Including the 30% acquired through indirect shares? 35. Enough to block any decision. He didn't laugh, just replied softly. Charlotte once said, if they won't see you, make them trip over you. I ended the call, settled into the chair, eyes lifting to the painting of Charlotte by the window, her face calm, as if she'd seen it all coming. Before dawn, I got out of bed, bare feet touching the cold wood floor of my old room. The sheer curtain trembled as wind from the bay swept through, carrying the scent of salt and wet grass. I brewed coffee, then began stacking the papers on my writing desk. At the top was the charter of the Charlotte Heritage Trust, a trust that had been established less than 48 hours earlier with the absolute discretion of Mr. Ross. Below it were 17 property portfolios, representing the entire real estate catalog I owned through anonymous holding companies. From a commercial strip in Stamford to a beachfront apartment row in Pawtucket. Every signature, every notarized seal was in its place. I spent nearly 3 hours reviewing the paperwork. Each transfer was assigned a unique identifier, cited with its funding source, and backed by undeniable legal validity. By 8:30 a.m., I slipped into a knee-length wool coat, fastened the final wooden button, and slid the document folder into a black leather bag. Harper was waiting in the hallway. She looked at me quietly. Ready? I nodded. We stepped into the main conference room at exactly 9 a.m. The space had already been arranged for what Uncle Nathaniel had dubbed the official voting session. Monitors were mounted in each corner, and the projector displayed the projected profit breakdown from the deal with Orion West Group. All they needed now was a signature. Nathaniel smiled like everything was already his. Before we signed the preliminary contract, I'd like to thank everyone for the near-unanimous support. The Thompson family has never moved this swiftly toward unifying our strategic vision. Polite laughter followed. I remained standing. Before you sign anything, I'd like to make a statement. My voice was calm and clear, slicing through Marissa's dismissive muttering. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, then leaned back and gestured casually with his hand. I placed the folder on the table. Slowly, I opened it, pulling out valuation pages, ownership certificates, share transfer agreements from the branches that had quietly cashed out. I spoke no emotion. I delivered data. Charlotte Heritage Trust currently holds 35% of the internal voting power through both direct and indirect shares in Thompson Holdings. Not a single sound. Harper pushed the projector forward. A revised voting rights chart appeared, with the column bearing my trust's name towering above the rest. Nathaniel straightened up. What is this? I turned to him, every word deliberate. Over the past several years, I've I've been quietly acquiring shares from members cashing out, piecing together the fragments no one noticed. All of it legal. All of it public record. Just never loudly broadcasted. Jared shot to his feet. That's not possible. It is, because none of you ever paid attention to me. You were too busy laughing at the car I drove, the apartment I lived in, the blazer I wore. Meanwhile, I was consolidating the very power you threw away, thinking it was worthless. I pulled out the final document, a formal offer to repurchase the ancestral estate at market price, signed by the trust. This estate will not be sold to any development group. It will be preserved, restored, and converted into the operations center for the Charlotte Trust, a hub for financial literacy programs and affordable housing initiatives. Nathaniel slumped back, blinking rapidly, struggling to absorb it all. You can't do this. I just did. Silence. The entire room felt vacuum-sealed. I turned to Harper and saw a look not just of support but of absolute trust. No one in that room was breathing normally after what I said. They stared like they were seeing a stranger. Like the woman speaking couldn't possibly be Evelyn, the one they'd mocked for her entire adult life. I returned to my seat, unlatched my leather case. Every motion was measured, intentional. I pulled out a new set of documents, flipped to the first page, and placed it on the table. This is a summary of the assets I personally own through the companies held by Charlotte Heritage Trust. As of last month, the total appraised value stands at $73.2 million. The detailed breakdown immediately lit up on the auxiliary projector. Boxed figures appeared. A retail complex in Stamford, a string of residential homes in Providence, an apartment complex in East Boston. Each line item paired with a third-party valuation and legal certification. I also confirm I'm the owner of Riverline Residential Tower in Cambridge, I continued. That's the building where Jared, Marissa, and Uncle Jeffrey are currently renting units. Marissa froze. Jared stared like he'd seen a ghost. Uncle Jeffrey went still holding a coffee cup midair. The apartment building you've been complaining about, the elevators, the hallway cameras, the quarterly rent increases? I'm the one who signs off on those. Still, no one spoke. My tone remained level, neither angry nor smug. And to clarify the question on voting rights, I paused. I acquired Red Hall Investments. That's the parent company holding 30% of Thompson Holdings, layered through 2 tiers of authorized ownership. The transaction was executed 3 months ago and finalized last week. On screen, the Charlotte Heritage Trust voting bloc now clearly read 35%. Nathaniel turned pale. This doesn't make sense, he muttered, flipping through folders as if hoping for a mistake. I looked him dead in the eye. What doesn't make sense is that someone you dismissed for 15 years quietly gathered enough power to shut down your entire plan. No one laughed anymore. The mockery had evaporated. Harper broke the silence with a crisp, deliberate clap. The sound echoed through the tensioned air. Looks like someone just gave the whole family a masterclass in strategy and foresight. I stepped back to the presentation stand and picked up a thinner folder. And now I'm unveiling the estate plan. It will not be bulldozed for soulless glass towers. It will become the official headquarters of the Charlotte Initiative, a nonprofit committed to 3 missions: public financial education, sustainable housing support, and micro-investment mentoring for low-income women. I looked around the table. For those of you who claimed I didn't understand the MITPOD, value of money, feel free to start learning. Kristen quietly placed her napkin back on her lap without meeting anyone's eyes. Jared lowered his head, lips pressed tight. Marissa held her phone but didn't dare open her mouth. I finished speaking, my voice calm, each word landing hard on the worn-down pride they had clung to. I don't need anyone's permission. I have assets, a legal structure, and voting power. From now on, I'll decide who in this family is worthy of participating in managing Charlotte's legacy. Nathaniel stood up. You think you can unilaterally impose all of this? I turned and met his eyes. Not unilaterally. Just no longer needing your approval. A cold silence stretched across the conference room. Harper leaned toward me and whispered, We don't need anyone's approval anymore. I gave a slight nod. The battle that had simmered for years ended not with shouting or accusations, but through spreadsheets, ownership charts, and dry signatures powerful enough to crush the pride that had been cemented in my family for 3 generations. 2 days after the family meeting, I got an email from Nathaniel's assistant. A lunch invitation at the Granary Club, the same place where 3 years ago, he denied my membership on the grounds of being incompatible with the family brand. I didn't respond right away. 3 hours later, Aunt Catherine texted, "Dear Evelyn, I'm organizing a scholarship fund for young Black women entering finance. Thought of you immediately. Would love to discuss ideas Friday afternoon?" Below was a heart emoji, something she used exclusively for her lapdogs before. Still no reply from me. That evening, my phone rang. It was Brad. I let it buzz 5 times before answering. "Miss Evelyn," he said, trying to sound relaxed. "I was just introduced to a suburban housing project outside Baltimore. Huge growth potential. If you're free, I'd love to. Grab coffee, get your input. Possibly partner if you're interested." I gave him a single reply. "I don't partner with people who once labeled me a liability to the family." No arguments followed. Just silence, like they had finally realized that screaming doesn't change outcomes when you no longer hold the remote. Only Harper stayed the same. Every night she still messaged, "Where are you headed tomorrow? Want help carrying any files? Jared's asking for Charlotte Initiative brochures. Do you want to send one?" I sent the abbreviated version, not to please them but because no one could stop me from making public what I was doing with the estate. The historic house had been painted white. The roof was redone using materials that preserved its original silhouette but with better durability. I kept the old brass plaque at the front gate. Thompson House, 1927, with a small new line below, headquarters of the Charlotte Trust, planting the seeds of lasting value. In the first week, more than 60 single mothers applied for financial mentorship. Many were from the same neighborhoods where I once rented rooms. Some lived in properties I now owned. We didn't hand out cash. We taught them how to read bank statements, analyze mortgage interest rates, and most importantly, understand their worth beyond what others see. I still returned to my old Cambridge apartment each night. Still drove the Subaru they mocked now with over 160,000 miles on it. Not because I needed to save money, because I had nothing to prove through a car model or a zip code. One Monday morning, as I stepped out of the Foundation's headquarters, a Range Rover was parked just outside. Nathaniel stepped out, wearing a gray wool coat, no assistant by his side. He stood still at the door, holding his fedora, eyes lowered until I got close. "I once thought you were Charlotte's biggest mistake," he said. "Now, maybe I need to relearn everything." I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply replied, "You don't have to apologize, just don't repeat it." He nodded and turned away. No invitation to collaborate. No mentorship pitch. No wordy justifications. It was the most respectful apology I'd ever received. That night, I sat in a small office on the second floor, once Charlotte's sewing room. The desk lamp cast a glow over a photo of her hugging me at age 8, with the rose garden she tended blooming behind us. I picked up a new file that had just arrived, a startup funding application from a 24-year-old woman selling goods online to support her 2 orphaned siblings. No degrees listed. Just detailed expenses, business sketches, and a promise to repay the loan in 3 years. I approved it. Then turned off the light. No one needed to capture that moment. True value doesn't exist in spotlight flashes. It's in how we work quietly until the one clear moment where everything finally becomes visible. Evelyn's story is a powerful reminder that real strength doesn't come from showing off but from observing, waiting, and preparing in silence. In a world that often measures worth by surface appearance, she built something enduring, not to get revenge, but to lead through action. She didn't raise her voice. She simply waited for the right time to prove that being underestimated could fuel a checkmate no one saw coming. What do you think of how Evelyn faced rejection and reclaimed her voice within the family? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more compelling and inspiring stories about family and life.